The Mega Man Battle Network collection comes out next year, eliminating the need for me to scramble to pick them all up on the Wii U's eShop before they disappear. Of course, that still leaves me unable to stream the games for the moment, so to get myself excited for the collection, I decided to play through one of the games in the series that I have for a non-handheld, Mega Man Network Transmission for the GameCube. To say that this game is weird would be an understatement, and the fact that it's merely a spin-off that was an exclusive for an underperforming console definitely didn't do much to make it a fan favorite. I imagine most people aren't even aware that this one exists. Still though, I played this one a lot during my adolescence, so I'd hate to see it lost to obscurity. I'm Wes, the Explosion, and these are my thoughts on the strangest entry in the Battle Network series. For those unaware of the setup of Battle Network, this is an alternate world from the classic series, a what-if scenario where internet technologies took off instead of robotics. Because of this, many of the Robot Masters return, this time as sentient, virus-busting internet browsers, running around the net as an interface for their users. These people are known as NetOps, and they work together with these programs, or NetNavis, to give them support in the form of weapons called battle chips. For the exact details of this story, there's a virus going around infecting Navis that slows their processes, and it's called the Zero virus. There's also a phony vaccine being circulated that's actually just a variant that makes the Navis go berserk instead. Pretty sure most fans of the X series can tell where this is going. There's a lot less to the story this time. Most dialogue happens right when you enter a level, before you fight a boss, and then after you beat them, with a few rounds of exposition when you reach major milestones in the game. Unlike the mainline games, whose plots keep on building and feeding into each other, here, nothing that happens ever gets referenced again. And that makes sense. This entry takes place between Battle Network 1 and 2 and was released after both games, so that they couldn't throw in anything that would affect either. At one point, you take down Quickman, who's a villain in the next game, and his NetOp thanks you for stopping him anonymously, since his identity would be kind of a spoiler for both the player and main character. While this does make it probably the lamest story in the Battle Network series, at the same time, I think it works in the favor of this game. The main lines are closer to an RPG, thus having a more in-depth story suits it, but here, Network Transmission is more action-oriented. The simpler story keeps things light and rarely breaks up the game's pace. It also makes this one easier to pick up, not needing as much backstory, and also lends the game a more cartoony, anime-ish feel, which I think was intentional. While I don't think anyone will write up any deep dives on Network Transmission and its power of friendship message, I think it does what it needs to. Mega Man has always been known for its platforming gameplay, though when Battle Network came out, it swapped things up for a deck-building RPG with grid-based combat. Quite the departure, but Network Transmission, for some strange reason, tried to marry the two. At a glance, it probably looks more like the former. You jump, you shoot, you slide, heck, later on, you can even charge. If you look a bit more closely at the UI though, you might notice an extra graphic, along with a few extra gauges, other than just the standard health bar. That's where the other half of the equation comes in, the battle chips. Like in the Game Boy Advance version, here you build a deck of them to aid you in combat. However, in the handheld games, you put individual chips of each into your deck, and if you wanted multiples, you'd have to put in multiples. Your folder would refresh after each fight. Here though, there's no random encounters, so they work a bit differently. You get a stack of each chip, giving you multiple uses of each, and them all having an upper limit to how many copies you can carry. You get new chips and extra copies by deleting the corresponding virus, but you need to do it fast to get the drop. Less efficient battling will have them dropping money, health, or just plain nothing instead. Some chips also have elements, fire beating wood, beating elect, beating aqua, beating fire, or a full circle. You can also form some combination of chips to create program advances, which are powered up versions of whatever ingredients you used. The most obvious are combining sword, wide sword, and long sword to make a life or dream sword, which has longer reach and much higher damage than the base chips. Using a cannon, high cannon, and M cannon will yield the Zeta cannon, which makes Mega Man invincible and grants him multiple uses of the powerful M cannon for several seconds, letting him go wild. These can really come through in a pinch. As for the other gauges, one is memory data, which determines how often you can use chips. The gauge refills slowly and each chip has a cost to use, so you have to consider what and how quickly you use a chip rather than just spam it. The other is a simple refill gauge. Once it's full, you can discard the current chips you have to get 5 more. You can save chips, holding them back for later, but can only have a hand of up to 10 and can only select up to 5 at once. And whatever chips you didn't use get shuffled back into your deck, unless you used them up. Oh, and each boss has 2 chips you can get. There's the basic boss weapon, but if you manage to take them down really fast, you can get their Navi chip. This freezes the game to summon in said Net Navi to perform their signature attack. You can only have up to 5 copies of each chip, and you can only have up to 5 different Navis in your deck at once, so as you can probably guess, these are some of the better chips that you can find. Oh boy, that was a lot, wasn't it? Hopefully I explained that well enough, and luckily the other upgrades I'm going to talk about are much easier to understand. You can get armors of each element that will cut down on damage done by said element. You can also buy or find data that will increase Mega Man's health, memory, and reg. Reg lets you set one chip to always show up when you shuffle, and the more reg you have, the higher grade chip you can set. You also get buster power-ups. You start off with a pea shooter, but you can upgrade 3 stats: attack, charge, and speed. This is mostly self-explanatory, but just in case, attack increases damage, charge improves your charge, you not being able to do so at all at first, and then you building it up to do so bigger and faster, and speed just lets you rapid fire. You can also buy sub-chips, which are one-use items that do things like heal Mega Man, let you unlock special mystery data in stages, or fill up your chip gauge. Lastly, there are backups, which are essentially extra lives. If you lose all your backups, you get game over and have to reload a save. If you beat a level, or just leave it before you get to this point, you can save whatever chips, items, and cash you picked up, and when you go back in, your backups are refreshed. Not gonna lie, I kinda like this. There's been plenty of times when I played a game and messed up early in a stage and had to decide whether I wanted to keep trying or SD and start over. Letting you mulligan at any point is pretty nice, and the more backups you have, the less you have to weigh pressing on against retreating. So while perhaps a little too generous, it is comfy. Oh, and here's another fun note. Spikes don't kill you in this one, they just do a ton of damage. While it'll likely be an insta for most of the game, you can increase your max HP to the point where you can tank a hit. The level design for this one is all over the place. Some are straightforward, some frustrating, some boring, some have fun gimmicks, some are inspired, and some feel ripped straight from the classic series. It makes it really hard to judge the game since you have some, like Color Man's level, where there are very simple paths that you just kinda walk through, that suddenly open up into a pinball machine. You have Iceman's, which is laid out nicely with even some nicely placed disappearing blocks, and Pharaoh Man's crazy area, which spirals in on itself. Then you get stuff like weird gravity effects like from Mega Man 5, which are cool, and then they throw in a level with Mega Man 2's security lasers, which I'll talk more at length if I ever review that game, just know that I hate them. While you can enter into some areas directly, some you need to find the entrance to in a big, central area, with a lot of interconnected parts. While I do appreciate what they were trying to do here, the internet is interconnected after all, it's not really laid out with a lot of rhyme or reason, so it can be very hard to either remember where something was or where you're supposed to go and get lost. I can see a lot of people getting turned off from the game early on because of this. Then you have the final stage, which is Pain. Some enemies have shields called auras. Each one has a value assigned to it that, while you can see it in the Game Boy games, you can't see here. You need to do that much damage in a single hit to break through them and to be able to actually hit the virus inside. While you can supplement your damage somewhat with elemental weaknesses, they still take a good chunk of damage. The final stage is littered with these enemies who can also dish out a good amount of pain. Navigating around them is tricky and in some cases requires tanking some hits to slip past. Actually being able to fight them will likely require some grinding. It makes for one of the hardest levels in all of Mega Man, not due to any innate challenge, so much as its requirement that you being a jumping weapons platform. I guess my point is that this game has some really stellar stages, mixed in with some absolute garbage, and while I like more stages than I hate, there's definitely a lot of whiplash going on. That also ties into this game's balance. which is some of the worst I've seen not just in Mega Man, but in gaming in general. You start off in a normal area, learn the basics, and then everything's on fire. That's not where things get weird though. The first boss is just Fireman, and he's appropriately strong for the role. No, it's immediately after, when, after doing busy work for a half hour or so, you have to fight Gutsman, which, in my opinion, is the second hardest boss encounter in the game. And it's not just that he's innately difficult, he's just a lot stronger than he should be that early in. He can take you out in around 3 hits. He has an attack where he jumps, and another where he strikes with his Guts hammer. And when each hit the ground, it'll still hurt you if you aren't in the air. The hammer comes out somewhat quick too, so you have to predict him. He waddles towards you, and while you can slide under him, he's likely to deliver a devastating Guts punch as soon as you stand back up. This fight took me the longest out of anything in my playthrough, around a half hour, and after that, I just kinda flew through the rest of the game, only having trouble again when I came up against the almost endgame Proto Man battle, which is bull. In addition to that, there's some weird jumps in some levels that are nigh impossible to make, and there's also that last stage I talked about. When your buster's weak in the beginning of the game, you have to rely on your chips a lot more and can find yourself running out of them pretty quickly in order to get anything done, making the first few stages unintentionally some of the harder ones. And yet, it's not all bad. The unbalance works both ways, and if you know what you're doing, you can straight up break the game. There are 2 chips that can absolutely destroy platforming sections. The Ice Cube creates a block that just gives you an extra platform. The double jump lets you keep jumping as long as you still have a copy of the chip. While Charge and Rapid are nice, Attack boosts both of them in a sense, so starting with that gives you the biggest boost, and once you have that and half of Charge powered up, you can wipe out most viruses, no problem, and save some of your better chips for bosses. Speaking of bosses, some have incredibly exploitable AI, like Electman and Zero. The final stage has a main section and sub-boss, then a boss rush, then a final boss, which seems daunting, but the game refreshes your chips after each part. While you might try and conserve your weapons at first, if you know about this, you can just go crazy. Color Man has the best Navi chip outside of maybe Roll, so grinding out wins against him can produce big returns. If you save the right chips, you can guarantee going into a boss fight with a program advance, and if there's one chip you want to show up more often for a stage, you can just use up some of your less important ones to increase the odds of it continuing to show up in a shuffle. Heck, if you want a hot tip, there's an optional boss that I've beaten in the past by using up all my chips except for those for the Zeta Cannon program advance and a heal. I then waited until my chip gauge was full, went into the fight, went ham on him with the cannon, then immediately shuffled to reactivate the program advance to unload on him again, and that was enough to win. No way that's what the developers intended for this one, but you know what? I was proud of myself for being clever enough to cheese it. Point is, this game will screw with you, but you have just as many ways, if not more, to screw back. Is that how I want to phrase that? The game looks okay, I guess? It's a GameCube title, so no one should be expecting next-gen graphics, but other titles on the console, like F-Zero and Wind Waker, totally put this one to shame. Then again, Wind Waker puts most games to shame, so maybe that's an unfair comparison, but still, this certainly ain't the best looking title from that gen. How good the character models look depends largely on how detailed they are, with Goliaths like Swordman and Gravity Man not looking too bad, and smaller, more human-looking characters like Iceman and, unfortunately, Mega Man looking kinda rough. A shame because the character designs are really good. Some of the enemies end up looking more like toys than sprites, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. The levels themselves are pretty simplistic, but that's also similar to how things look in the mainline games, so I can't complain. They have some pretty wild backgrounds though, I'll give it that. The main area has one filled in with computer parts, like motherboards and fans, and the waterwork has robo-fish and ice cream. It's really weird, but in a fun and whimsical way. It's kinda like the story, where the visuals won't win any awards, but it probably works for what the game's going for, at least in the context of it trying to be more anime feel. Might be a little rough for some people though. The sound is where the game really shines. The sound effects can be kinda goofy and cartoony, and while the cutscenes aren't fully voiced, there are some in-game lines for most major characters, like when they attack or take damage. I think the VAs are the same that the anime series had, so it's only in Japanese, but it's still nice. The game's soundtrack is amazing. While there are one or two that might be a little annoying, the vast majority of the songs are really catchy and fit their stages really well. While most are original, there are some that borrow elements from the classics tracks, notably the levels for Fireman and Pharaohman, and the big, get hyped friendship music this time around is actually a vocalist remix of the anime's opening theme. I wish I could be a little more articulate about just how great I think this OST is. It just does so much, covering so many bases and so competently that it's really hard to sum up. The arcade sounds wacky, the bank sounds tense, Gravity Man's stage really seems to like its rockin' guitars, and Starman's no gravity area is just magical. I could loop that one over and over again. In a series as well renowned for its music as Mega Man, Network Transmission's soundtrack ranks among my personal favorites. I have now played through Mega Man Network Transmission 3 times. The first was when I was a teen. I loved the game and played it way too much, getting all the chips and upgrades, grinding out wins against bosses, and beating the final stage over and over again. I honestly thought this was a hidden gem. Then, in my 20s, I did this as a Let's Play with a friend, and my view was shattered. It was rough, frustrating, and I just kind of thought of younger me as some sort of idiot with no standards. I've now played it again in my 30s, and my opinion is somewhere in the middle. When I was younger, I had a lot more free time and could spend a while learning the ins and outs of this game. When I did the Let's Play, I was kinda going through whatever game and also trying to be entertaining, so my skill and patience were both down. Now I'm in kind of a unique position where I can handle this game without too much trouble. I've been playing a lot of X and a little bit of Classic, so my platforming skills are in good shape, much like when I was a teen. I've also played through the Battle Network series proper, so I know what most chips and upgrades do. I've also played through this game twice before, so dumb tricks like Flink Elect Man, then Slide, then Partial Charge Shot him, repeat until dead, are floating around in the back of my mind. End of the day, I do really like this game, but I really wouldn't recommend it to most people. I think I was able to really have fun with it this go around because I had all three elements going for me: classic skill, battle chip knowledge, and cheese. Heck, I even impressed myself with this one, me expecting this to take me 3 streams at least to clear, but not being able to drag it out past 2, even with a bit of grinding for M cannons and Navi chips, for a clear time of around 6 hours. Most people, though, are going to get frustrated with one thing or another in this game and huck it into the trash pretty early. If you're a huge Mega Man fan and you like both Classic and Battle Network, it might be worth a try, but even then, you're probably going to get a little weirded out. Know about the only type of person I can see really getting a lot out of this game are those who, like I said, want to break it. If you listen to my Zeta Cannon, double jump, slide, boss killing bullcrap, and felt a twinge of excitement, Network Transmission is a mess, but it might just be your kind of mess. For everyone else, just listen to the OST. But hey, that's just my take. What about you? Did you play the game, and if so, did you like it? And if not, are you morbidly curious, despite my warnings? A bit of a hard one to track down right now, but maybe after Legends and Star Force get its collections, we'll get one for the odd spin-offs. For right now though, thanks for watching, and maybe consider subscribing if you enjoyed the video and just Mega Man content in general. Have a good night!